It was a warm summer evening when David moved into his new apartment. The building, an old Victorian structure tucked away on a quiet street, had a certain charm to it despite its age. As David unpacked his belongings in the bedroom, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with apprehension about starting this new chapter of his life. The bedroom was cozy, with a large window that overlooked the street below. David placed his bed against one wall and arranged his dresser and nightstand on the opposite side. As he unpacked his clothes, he noticed a small door tucked away in the corner of the room. Curious, he walked over to inspect it. The door seemed to lead to a small storage space, likely an attic or crawl space. Ignoring the door for the moment, David finished setting up his room. By the time he was done, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the floor. He climbed into bed, exhausted from the day's move, and quickly fell asleep. In the middle of the night, David was jolted awake by a strange noise coming from the corner of the room. He sat up in bed, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what he heard. It sounded like a soft tapping, almost like footsteps. "Hello?" David called out nervously, but there was no response. He reached for the bedside lamp and turned it on, illuminating the room. Everything seemed normal, but David couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He got out of bed and cautiously approached the corner where the noise had come from. The tapping had stopped. David hesitated before turning his attention to the small door he had noticed earlier. With a deep breath, he grasped the handle and pulled it open. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a dark space beyond. Using his phone as a flashlight, David peered into the storage area. It was empty except for a few cobwebs and dust. Shaking his head, David closed the door and returned to bed, convincing himself that he had imagined the whole thing. But as he lay there in the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Over the next few nights, David's unease grew. He began hearing the tapping noise more frequently, always in the dead of night. Each time he investigated, the room appeared empty. He started to question his sanity, wondering if the stress of the move was getting to him. One night, unable to sleep, David decided to stay awake and wait for the noise. Sure enough, around 3 a.m., he heard it again, the soft tapping coming from the corner of the room. This time, David was determined to catch whatever was causing it. He quietly got out of bed and tiptoed toward the corner, his heart pounding in his chest. The tapping continued rhythmically. As he approached, David noticed a shadowy figure in the darkness. Frozen with fear, he watched as the figure seemed to materialize into a man standing by the wall. The man was pale, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through David. He wore old-fashioned clothes, like something from another era. David's breath caught in his throat as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. "Who are you?" David managed to whisper. The man didn't respond. Instead, he slowly raised his hand and pointed toward the small door in the corner of the room. Without taking his eyes off the figure, David glanced at the door. It was slightly ajar, the darkness beyond seeming to beckon him. Summoning all his courage, David edged closer to the door, the man's gaze never leaving him. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open wider and shone his phone's light into the darkness. To his horror, David saw a staircase leading up into the attic. He had never noticed this before. The door had always appeared to lead to a small storage space. As he stared up the staircase, a chill ran down his spine. The man in the room began to slowly fade away, his form dissipating like smoke in the wind. David stood there, paralyzed with fear and confusion. Was he losing his mind? Without another thought, David slammed the door shut and retreated to his bed, pulling the covers over his head like a child hiding from monsters. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night, haunted by the encounter. The next day, David resolved to investigate further. He searched the apartment building's history online, hoping to find some clue as to who the man might have been. To his surprise, he discovered that the building had been constructed in the late 1800s and had served as a boarding house for decades. Digging deeper, David learned that there had been reports of strange occurrences in the building over the years, unexplained noises, sightings of shadowy figures, and even rumors of a tragic incident involving one of the former tenants. Armed with this newfound information, David returned to his apartment that evening, determined to confront whatever was haunting him. As night fell, he sat in his room, waiting for the inevitable tapping to begin. Sure enough, as the clock struck midnight, the tapping echoed through the room. This time, however, David felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He knew what he had to do. With a deep breath, David stood up and approached the small door in the corner. He pushed it open, revealing the staircase leading into the darkness above. As he climbed the stairs, he felt a presence beside him, as if the man from the room was guiding him. At the top of the stairs, David found himself in a dusty attic filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. But it was what lay at the far end of the attic that caught his attention, a small wooden chest covered in cobwebs. Heart racing, David approached the chest and carefully lifted the lid. Inside, he found a collection of old photographs and letters, all dating back to the late 1800s. Among them was a faded portrait of a man who bore a striking resemblance to the figure David had seen in his room. As he examined the contents of the chest, David felt a sense of closure wash over him. The man in the room wasn't there to harm him, he was trying to communicate something. Perhaps he was a lost soul seeking resolution. David carefully packed up the belongings in the chest and brought them downstairs. The next day, he visited the local historical society and shared his findings. Together, they pieced together the story of the man in the room, a former tenant who had tragically died in the building under mysterious circumstances. With the truth revealed, David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The tapping noises ceased, and he never saw the man in the room again. He continued to live in the apartment for years, appreciating its history and the sense of peace he had found. To this day, David remains grateful for the experience, as unsettling as it was. It taught him the importance of confronting fears and seeking understanding in the face of the unknown. And though he has moved on from that apartment, he carries the memory of the man in the room with him, a reminder of the mysteries that can lie hidden in the most unexpected of places.